Good morning, everybody. Keith Engel, TGI Sports Talk on this snowy Friday morning here in the Northeast. I'm not sure about where you guys are. I know some of you here locally will be seeing some white stuff. Our first snowstorm. When I was a kid, it wasn't a snowstorm until it was about 10 inches. But a couple inches qualifies these days. I want to welcome you in. Thank you for watching. Hope you'll like and follow the page. If you haven't already done so, certainly share our videos. Morning, Dave Guyette. I want to start by thanking my guest from last week, Ian O'Connor. Ian, I guess what we could focus on was his book, Belichick. We covered a lot of topics, and he was very, very thorough in this book. If you haven't seen the book, read it. We had a great interview. We had some technical issues, so again, bear with them for a few minutes. They cleared up. I think it's the scroll. I cannot use the scroll on the bottom of the screen, unfortunately. So I apologize, and we'll try to keep those to a minimum in the future. My guest today is Billy Martin Jr. Unfortunately, Billy is not in the waiting room yet, so we're hoping Billy is just temporarily delayed. Checking my email, and I should probably check my Facebook messages quick. Anyway, next week our guest next week will be Fred Mitchell. Fred was a longtime writer for the Chicago Tribune, starting in 1974, and he covered the Bears, the Bulls, the Cubs, and he's really the only sports writer in Chicago Tribune history to do all of that. And he also has written the book on Gale Sayers, the great Gale Sayers. And for some of you younger guys, if you don't know who Gale Sayers is, because he had a very short career because of injuries with the Bears, great player. You may be more familiar with the movie Brian Song, which is the story of the relationship between Brian Piccolo and Gale Sayers. It's a great book. And also Brian Song was the name of the book, and also the movie, the old movie of Billy D. Williams and James Caan. I do not know who was in the remake that they made here a few years ago. So again, those of you just tuning in, I'm hoping we will have our guest Billy Martin Jr. On to talk about his legendary dad, Yankee manager Billy Martin. Not sure. This is the first time we've had this issue, and I hope that Billy is able to make his way into the room before too long here. I will certainly stretch. For those of you who don't know who Billy Martin is, I know many of my audience and my demographic certainly knows Billy Martin from his days managing the Yankees, but Billy was a Yankee player. I don't want to cover too much, hoping that Billy Jr. gets here. But Billy was a player with the Yankees. Very famously was traded. He was actually an all-star in 56. He was a clutch player in some World Series with the Yankees. And then he was very famously traded to Kansas City after a incident at the Copacabana, which he was kind of banished, but he was welcomed back. He was one of Casey's boys. He was Casey's boy. Loved Casey Stengel. Casey taught him so much. And Billy's dream was to manage the Yankees one day. And after his playing days, he became a coach with the in the Twins organization, where he finished his playing career. Managed 1 year AAA in Denver, did tremendous, and he went right to the to the big leagues at a very young age, relatively speaking. In 1969, led them to a division title. Turned the team's fortunes around, as was Billy's forte. And then was unceremoniously fired following the season with a couple of incidents that happened with some players. I mean, that was Billy's thing. Billy would come in, turn a team around, and kind of wear out his welcome early. And Billy's a great manager, great field manager. I think he belongs in the Hall of Fame. I know his son, Billy Jr., does. And I'm trying to keep an eye out for some messages from Billy, so I'm not getting anything, guys. So bear with me. Hopefully he'll make it to the room. We'll talk about Billy as we go along here today. So don't leave. I hope to have Billy here. So after that, Billy moved on to the Tigers, who were in a downswing. They were an aging club, very few young guys on there, but he won a division title in 1972. Had a very famous playoff with the A's, which was a bit contentious. Ended up with Burt Campaneris throwing a bat at Larry LeGros and being suspended. Commissioner ended up moving the suspension to the start of the year so that Burt could play in the World Series after the A's had beat the Tigers. And then after wearing out his welcome there, he moved on to Texas and turned a horrible team around. I think the team won 57 games. I want to say 57 games the year before. And they won 84 games, which doesn't seem like a lot, I suppose, but he had them threatening the world champion Oakland A's the entire season. With a team of not, Jeff Burroughs, Fergie Jenkins was on that team. He just gotten traded to them. But other than that, I mean, they weren't, they didn't have superstars galore there. So Billy did a tremendous job there. And the next year, things didn't go quite as well. But one George S. Steinbrenner from the Yankees had his eye on Billy. I think just waiting for him to get fired. And as soon as he was fired, George fired Bill Verdon, who put the Yankees in contention the year before himself in 1974, and brought Billy in 1975. And the saga really began then. Billy did lead the Yankees to their first pennant in 1976, their first pennant since 1964, which was a long time, at least at that point in the history. It was a long time for the Yankees to go without winning. And then, they went to the World Series, got swept by the Reds, really weren't competitive, but they still were missing some pieces. In the offseason of 1976, free agency was just coming into full swing, as it were. And George went full tilt. Billy, and they had some disagreements there, Billy and George and Gabe Paul, the general manager. Billy wanted Joe Rudy, wanted Bobby Grich. Bobby Grich to play shortstop, ironically. He was a great second baseman. But George wanted to make the big splash. He wanted the one and only Reggie Jackson, which Billy did not want. So that started the whole 1977 was a year full of turmoil, maybe not as bad as 78, as we'll get to in a second, but they had their famous dugout fight. Billy, it started in spring training when Reggie did an interview for Sport Magazine, came out just as the season was starting, and Reggie says he was misquoted, and when he called Thurman, he called himself the straw that stirs the drink. And that got out. Thurman took it the wrong way, that Thurman can only, he did say Thurman can only stir it badly. Thurman was the team captain, did not sit well with Thurman, didn't sit well with a lot of the teammates who loved Thurman. And it got Reggie off on a very bad foot when he got to spring training. So, then he said he was misquoted, and, Munson was asked about him being misquoted, and I won't use all the words that Thurman used, but he said for 20 effing pages or something along those lines, he was misquoted. So there's a lot of turmoil that season, setting the stage for the next season as well. They had a very famous almost dugout fight. It was dugout altercation in 1977, I think in June in Fenway Park. Reggie kind of loafed after a ball, and Billy sent Paul Blair out to replace him. And Reggie was incredulous, obviously. Came in, went right after Billy, and Billy was right there. And if it wasn't for Yogi and Elston Howard, then there could have been. This was on a national TV game, by the way. That back in the day when all the games were seen, almost every night you got 3, 4, or 5 games on. Here we got one game, Saturday game of the week. Everybody in the nation was watching that game. So not a good view there, Reggie. And the Yankees weren't in first place. They were struggling at the time. But they turned it around, won a World Series. Reggie very famously hits 3 home runs in Game 6, the series clincher. And everybody loves everybody again. Billy gave him a big hug as he got to the dugout after the 3rd home run. This all followed, by the way, the Kansas City series. The Yankees played, if you don't remember, the Yankees played Kansas City in the AL Championship Series 3 years running. And they were great series. And in this series in 77, Billy benched Reggie in Game 7 against Paul Splittorff. But used him in a very, very big spot later in the game, I think against Doug Bird, if I remember right. And Reggie came through with a big hit and another big hit. And the Yankees ended up coming back and winning that game and obviously getting to the World Series. Reggie hits the 3 home runs. And again, everybody loves everybody. Great to see the Yankees win again after 13 years. I'm just 17 years old. I'd never seen the Yankees win. I was too young. 12 years seemed like an eternity. Today, it doesn't seem so long. It's been 11 years again, I guess. So, but we had a longer dry spell from 78 to 96. 18 years. So again, for the Yankees, though, we're winning World Series year after year, going to the World Series year after year and winning the majority of the ones they were in. It was 12 years or 13 years by the time they finally won was an eternity. We get to 78. Still hoping Billy shows up here, guys. I was really looking forward to this interview, and I apologize. I'm not sure where the miscommunication came from, but we will stretch, and I will tell some Yankee and Billy Martin stories as long as I can. Put your questions in the chat room. I'll be glad to answer them. Dave's answering. Billy had David Guyette met Billy in Johnstown here. I remember them coming in, Dave, for I'll just divert here a little bit before I go to 1978. I remember in 78, 79, I'm not sure what year you're referring to. You might be a little younger than me, Dave, but they had a sports banquet, where I'm not sure if Billy was at this one, but Bucky Dent was there, Greg Nettles was there. So I don't know if that's the same one. And Dave also refers to the Bronx Zoo, which is another famous book written I think that was Sparky Lyle wrote the Bronx Zoo, which detailed some of the stuff that was going on that we know about and stuff maybe we didn't know about at the time. It was one of the first tell-all books, really getting behind the scenes and digging into the corners of the things going on. They're prevalent today, but they weren't then. Bronx Zoo is a great book. I believe there's Bronx Zoo, or it could have been in Greg Nettles' own book that Greg Nettles had a pretty famous comment where he mentioned when he was a kid, he wanted to either be in the circus. Oh, gosh. What was the line? Help me out, Dave. Bet you know. Maybe it was he wanted to be a ball player or in the circus, and he got the best of both worlds. I think that was kind of it. Speaking of, Billy was an awesome manager. I agree. For all of Billy's flaws, he was a tremendous manager. So for those of you just joining us, my guest is supposed to be Billy Martin Jr. I don't know if Billy's having some technical issues. I think he's in Arlington this morning, and I'm hoping that Billy still joins us. I've sent a message to Billy. Let me send another quick message before we move on to 1978. Yeah, he hasn't seen last night's. Hope Billy's okay. Let's just hope Billy's okay and everything's okay in Arlington. Not sure what the weather is there. I know they had some bad weather come through. I don't know if Arlington was hit, but I doubt it. But anyway, we'll talk about Yankees and Billy amongst ourselves here. You guys, we've already had some comments from Karen and David. Please, guys, put some comments in the room. We'll have a discussion about Billy, about the Yankees from those times. Give your opinion, your famous, your opinions on Billy, good or bad. I mean, I know Billy Jr.'s here to kind of push his candidacy for the Hall of Fame. I'm all for that. As I mentioned at the top of the show. And I know Dave Guyette is. He mentioned it during last week's show with Ian O'Connor when I mentioned Billy's name. So, of course, I think Dave thinks, don't take this the wrong way, Dave. I mean it in the best possible way. I think Dave thinks everybody on the Yankees should be in a Hall of Fame. So every time I mention Yankees name, he should be in the Hall of Fame. Okay, let's continue. 77, the Yankees win the World Series. 1978 comes along. Things are pretty calm. Spring training. Yankees bring in Goose Gossage, Don Gullett, some other big name free agents, as George was wont to do in those days. And things don't go so well. They get off to a bad start. They fall 14 and a half games out of first place behind the hated Red Sox. There's more tension as things are going badly, and Billy continues to refuse to bat Billy in the cleanup spot where Reggie feels it's just disrespecting him by not doing it. I don't know. Again, I wish we had Billy Jr. with us so that we could ask these questions. Did Billy do it to spite Reggie and just kind of try to put him in his place? Or, did he just want to put the best lineup on the field? And there was a very, again, what really everything came to a head in 1978 in Kansas City. It's a close ball game. Reggie comes up and looks down. There's men on base. Less than 2 outs. Billy gives Dick Hauser, the third base coach, the bunt sign. And, Reggie's probably never been asked to bunt in his entire career. He's one of the greatest sluggers in the game. And, Karen believes Billy belongs in the Hall of Fame too. I agree. So Reggie gets the bunt sign, talks to Dick Hauser, cannot believe it. Tries to bunt once, tries to bunt twice. He's got 2 strikes. Does it miserable efforts. And Dick Hauser, obviously, and Billy Martin take the bunt sign off. Bunt with 2 strikes. Odd, you're bunting your slugger with 2. Anyway, that's a different story. And Reggie, to everyone's disbelief, still tries to bunt. Bunts it foul, he's out. If you don't know it, bunting with 2 strikes is running in foul is a strikeout. And Billy's just fuming. And Reggie gets to the dugout, takes off his glasses, neatly folds them up, puts them aside, expecting this Fenway Park type explosion with Billy in the dugout. And I'm not sure who intervened. It might have been Reggie's best friend on the team, Fran Healy, but they got him out of the dugout, got him to the locker room, and he was suspended, 3, 4, 5 games. But it started a war of words in the paper. And Billy, waiting for a plane, famously was asked about the whole situation and Reggie's relationship with George and his relationship with Billy himself. And Billy said they deserve each other. One's a liar and one's convicted. Obviously, speaking about Reggie being a liar and George being convicted, as George in 73 was convicted of illegal campaign contributions to the Nixon campaign, 72. Didn't go to jail, but he was suspended from baseball for a year when he first bought the team. Billy gets fired, probably not unexpectedly. Billy gets fired. He's very upset. Bob Lemon comes in. Team goes on a run, and miraculously comes back from 14.5 game deficit in July to force a 1-game playoff in Fenway with the Red Sox. And everybody knows what happens in that game. If you're a Yankee fan, you've got that's where the legendary Bucky effing Dent comes from. That's how he's known affectionately in Boston from that day forward. I want to say October 2nd, 1978. And it was a great game. It was a fun game. There were great plays all around. But Bob Lemon was a guy the Yankees needed at that point. There was turmoil surrounding everybody. Everybody's mad at everybody. Everybody's mad at Reggie. Reggie's mad at Billy and George. George is just mad at the world. They're 14.5 games behind the Red Sox. Could the Yankees have done that in this day and age? Probably not. There was lack of media. There was no ESPN. There was no social media. There was no... They didn't even have newspapers because the newspapers were on strike, and that's probably the saving grace for the Yankees in 1978, by the way, is the fact that the newspapers in New York City were on strike. No stories about the Yankees being 14.5 games behind first base. That's right. Karen loves Bucky, too. I'm waiting for Dave to speak up that Bucky belongs in the Hall of Fame. I'll tell you a quick story about Bucky. Not Bucky. I had Greg Pryor on as one of my first guests on this show. And I told Greg, and I was very serious, that Greg Pryor could have been Greg effing Pryor because the Yankees had traded for Bucky Dent before the 77 season. And they had Greg Pryor, and they had some other capable shortstops. I think Greg Pryor was a very, very good major leaguer and could have been the shortstop for the Yankees and done exactly what Bucky Dent did for them. That's not to take anything away from Bucky Dent, but I joke with Greg that he could have been, Bucky Dent, or in this case, Greg effing Pryor if he lived in an alternate universe and he hit that home run in the 7th inning. Karen thinks they all belong in the Hall of Fame. I love it. The Yankee homers. I'm a Yankee homer. I don't think they all belong there, but there were some great players. There's some great role players on those teams. Thurman, I think, belongs in the Hall of Fame. Reggie's obviously there. Catfish is there, although Catfish was a shell of himself by 78. But he did come back strong. He had some arm manipulations done. He had a bad shoulder. He pitched so much for the Yankees in 75. He was really never the same pitcher. But he was a huge contributor down the stretch in 78 as they came back, as I said, for that 14.5 game deficit. Now, I got to digress a little bit. So the Yankees obviously have that big home run from Bucky Dent. They beat the Dodgers. I'm sorry, they beat the Red Sox. Yes, Dave, I agree. Thurman, Munson, Billy Martin definitely belong in the Hall of Fame. I got a couple other statements I'll make later as we try to fill time here for the next half hour. And I apologize, guys, for Billy Martin Jr. not being on. I'm going to try my best to reschedule him. I'm not sure. We communicated yesterday, and I thought we were good. Just checking again to see if I have any messages from him, and I do not. So I apologize. Let me continue. We'll continue down the path of Billy Martin in Yankee history because I can do it. I know it verbatim. Probably so does Dave and Karen. Maybe the weather, maybe Karen. I don't know. Billy's I think, in Arlington. I'm not positive. We talked about the time difference several times, so hopefully that's not it, because if he comes on at 9, I got to be off. I'll have him on for 5 minutes, and we'll have to go from there. But anyway, I hope that's not the case. And I hope he's okay. Hope everything's okay. We'll talk a little bit about Billy Jr. again maybe before the show's over. But let's continue down this path of Billy Martin and Yankee history. So we beat the Red Sox in that 1-game playoff. They beat the A's in another nail-biter. I mean, all three of those series in the 70s, 76, 77, 78 were all nail-biters. Great playoffs. and the Yankees prevailed all 3 times, which probably colors my opinion. But we get to the Dodgers. I'm going to tell just a quick story. We beat the Dodgers, obviously, but the Yankees were down. I don't know how many people remember this. You real Yankees fans will. We're down 2-0 going to L.A. And Ron Guidry's on the mound. Ron Guidry had a great year that year. I believe he's 25-3. Won like 19 games after the Yankees lost the game. So tremendous year from Ron Guidry, but this night he just didn't have it. They were hammering him all over the ballpark. Guys on base every inning. 2, 3 guys. And Greg Nettles saved 5 runs with 3 of the greatest plays I've ever seen a third baseman make. I'm a little biased again, but Greg Nettles is probably the best defensive third baseman I've ever seen. Didn't see Brooks play in his prime. I've seen a lot of the guys since Greg Nettles. Nettles made some great plays. He was awesome. He turned that series around in that game. Yankees came back, won it in 6. Bob Lemon was a right guy for that time when they brought him in to replace Billy. Had a very even hand. He just put the guys on the field. He filled the lineup card and let them play. Where Billy was, a lot different, personality for sure. 79. Oh, I have to digress for a second. What happened after Billy's fired in July? I think it's 2 weeks later. We're at Old Timers game day for the Old Timers game. And all the old timers are introduced. We don't expect to see Billy. Billy just got fired. The last Yankee announced by Bob Shepard that day, and if you're watching it and you're a Billy fan, I had goosebumps because it was announced as they had introduced him for Old Timers Day that former Yankee manager, and again to be the Yankee manager in 1980, year and a half down the road, Billy Martin. This stuff only happens with the Yankees, folks. It was surreal, but also just great theater. And again, the hair on my neck stood up. So Billy's going to be the manager again in 1980. Bob Lemon's going to kick upstairs at GM, I think. But Bob's going to manage the rest of 78 and all of 79, theoretically. We go to 79. The Yankees are 2-time defending world champions. Bob Lemon's there. Everything seems great. Trying to think who they brought in for 79. I think Tommy John came in 79. It might be 80. I apologize if I'm wrong. Louis Tiant. Oh, God, there was all kinds of different names. 79 was a year. It was a revolving door of names. Yankees again are struggling. The Orioles had a great year in 79, just kind of ran away from the pack, but the Yankees were struggling. Bob Lemon had lost his son tragically in the off season. And he was kind of a shell of himself, and things just weren't going well. And he was let go, and Billy was brought back early, I think in June of that year. So, the Yankees don't get much better. They play middling baseball, and the season really died on August 2nd, 1979, when tragically Thurman was killed in the, flying his plane, practicing landings and takeoffs. And we all know that story, and we don't want to, get depressed this morning. So I remember every August 2nd like it was 1979. I was 19 years old again. So anyway, that season was just lost. We had a fight in the locker room between Cliff Johnson and Goose Gossett, just 2 huge guys fighting each other, and Goose breaks his thumb, and they're without Goose for 2 or 3 months, and that's pretty much the season. They lost. Billy does come back though in 80. I take that back. Take that back. Billy doesn't even make it to the next season because he gets in a fight, I believe, with the Marshmallow Man in Minnesota during the offseason. Punches out a marshmallow salesman. Stories vary. Again, another reason I want Billy Jr. on, because I want to get the real story on these things, or the other side of the story. The real story is probably somewhere in between. But Billy had these types of things, and he had this gunslinger persona that he carried about. So, Billy was in a bar drinking. Guys would get a few pops and they call him out, just like Jesse James. So that didn't, obviously help, and Billy wasn't going to back down from an altercation, unfortunately. So anyway, he gets in this altercation in Minnesota and gets fired again. Yankees hired Dick Howser. Billy goes to Oakland. Again, another moribund franchise. Awful. They'd fallen. They were world champions 3 times in a row in the early to mid 70s, ending in early 70s. 1974 was their last championship, but by 1980 they were awful. 77, 78, 79. They probably had the worst teams. They were among the worst teams in baseball. Billy comes in. They win 83 games in 80. Had 4 great starters, really. Mike Norris, Steve McCaddy, Rick Langford, and Matt Keogh. And Billy gets them to 83. They're in contention. They finished second behind the Royals, who won the World Series, had another championship series with the Yankees. Just to kind of tie this together, we're talking about Billy mostly, but again, the Yankees won the East, came back and won the East in 80 with Dick Howser. Dick won 102 games. They get beaten 3 games by the Royals, and Howser gets fired by George. Not unusual for George in those times. Very sad. Dick Howser is a class guy and never should have been fired for winning 102 games and losing to a really good Royals team. Really good. They went on to win the World Series against the Phillies. Anyway, back in Oakland, Billy's got the A's on the right track. 81 season comes along. 81 season was a disaster from the start. We got labor disputes, rumors of a strike happening. The strike does happen after 60-ish games been played. Not everybody played the same amount. The A's had played 60. We're in first place in the West. We end up with a split season. I think we lost I want to say we lost 2 months of baseball, and the decision was made to play split seasons, and the first half of winter would play the second half winter, which was not a great plan in some cases. I mean, Cincinnati Reds, for instance, had the best record in all of baseball that year. Didn't make the playoffs because they didn't finish first in the first half or the second half. But the A's did. The A's finished first in the first half of the season and second in the second half of the season. They finished the season 54 and 45. They beat the Royals in the first ever league division series, which we've come to know and love as we've expanded the playoffs over the years. 20 years after this, probably, or not quite 20 years, maybe 15 or 18 years after this. And who do they see in the World Series, or who do they see in the ALCS? The Yankees. Great theater, right? Can't make it up. Yankees win the series fairly handily, I think, to my memory. Even though after the championship dinner, after winning that series, they did have another Yankee moment where Nettles and Jackson got into a fight. Who knows about what? Somebody's jacket, somebody's this, somebody's that. There was always something going on with the Yankees in those days. But they were a great team. So Billy, actually, again, turned around another moribund franchise, which was his forte, as I said earlier in the show. Did a great job. Now, we get to 1982, and things, Billy lasted 3 years there in Oakland, which is kind of long for Billy. I mean, it's one of his longest stints. 3 years with the Tigers, 1 year with the Twins, 3 years with the Tigers. a year and a half, I guess 2 years if you want to add the seasons together in Texas. With the Yankees, full seasons, only 2 really. He managed part of 75, part of 78, part of 79. He'll be back with the Yankees. We'll be back in a second to talk about that. But he runs out of magic in Oakland. They finish 68 and 94, and he gets fired. But true to form, Billy doesn't sit out long. Oh, by the way, with the A's, again, they had that great pitching staff that I mentioned of Norris and McCaddy and Langford and Keogh to a lesser extent, I think. But Billy kind of, and again, he'd been accused of this over the years of abusing pitchers' arms. I mean, those guys' arms were hanging off. They threw complete games right and left. And to be honest with you, I'm an old schooler. You know, when I was growing up in the late 60s, 70s, when baseball was becoming a big part of my life, pitchers were expected to finish what they started. Guys it wasn't uncommon for guys to complete 20 games a year, or in some cases more. I think Catfish completed like all but 5 of his starts or something his first year with the Yankees, and Billy was the manager for the second half of that season. So Billy had his reputation for burning out pitchers. Joe Torre had it later, but in a different context of doing it with relief pitchers and pitching them too much. But anyway, Billy gets fired partly for that because those guys all fell apart. That great rotation just fell apart. Mike Norris never reached his potential. Steve McCaddy was a decent pitcher for a few years. Langford went downhill quickly. Matt Keogh washed out very quickly. Karen, who's your mom's favorite team, by the way, while I'm chatting here? I don't know if we're still talking about the Yankees or the A's here. So anyway, Billy's fired for that, and I'm sure there was some other off-the-field stuff that played into it. The new ownership, I believe, came in as well for Oakland. So, interestingly enough, though, the Yankees, after a horrible 81, well, 81 wasn't horrible. I mean, they went through a ton of managers in that split season. I'm trying to remember where we started out. I want to say Bob Lemon started the season. He didn't make it 13 games. Gene Michael came in. He didn't make it. No, Bob Lemon came in later. I'm sorry. Gene Michael started the season. Bob Lemon comes in. And actually, they get back to the playoffs. They beat the Brewers and the LDS. They beat the A's, as I said. They got to the World Series and lost to the Dodgers. Lemon steps away again. 82 was just a mishmash of managers. I can't even name them all. Gene Michael, Clyde King. Not even sure the rest of the names right now. Karen's mom's favorite team is the Yankees. As it should be, Karen. As it should be. So in 83, the Yankees are looking for a manager. Where does George go for the third time but to Billy Martin? They had a really good team. They finished 91 and 71. They finished in third place. It was a good team, and they just couldn't, get over the hump. Again, the Royals, the Orioles were really, really good that season. Really good. And unfortunately, after that season, there's another problem. Billy gets fired. And Billy, for the first time in his baseball career, back to his time of playing, sits out the season, doesn't do anything, doesn't manage, doesn't do anything in 84. But in 84, the Yankees have another disastrous season. And guess who's back in 85 after George had promised Yogi the entire season? Billy Martin. I think, let's see, let me do the math here. 130. See, Billy, I mean, he fired Yogi after 20 games or so. Just not, not cool. He promised Yogi the whole season. It's the only reason Yogi took the job and whatever. Billy's back. He goes 91 and what's he go? 91 and 54. Great run there. Who knows? Again, Yogi, it's not Yogi's fault they got off to a horrible start. But Yankees finished second again to the Blue Jays, I believe, that year. And there's a problem again in the offseason, and Billy's fired. But he sits out 86 and 87. And Billy's got one more run in him. But George brings him back for 88 season. Again, the seasons for the Yankees in 86 and 87. Again, pretty nondescript. George brings Billy back for the fourth time. David Guyette says Yogi was the Yankees manager for a short time, got fired after, I think it was 16 games myself, Dave. Really a disrespectful way to treat Yogi, by the way. Did get Billy back again, though. Anyway, in 88, George brings him back again. Billy makes it 68 games this time. Had a very famous fight in a bar with his own pitcher, Ed Whitson. The second time, by the way, he had a fight with his own pitcher in a bar. I believe Dave Bosman for the Twins was one of the reasons Billy probably got fired in 69 after turning that franchise around and losing to the Orioles in the playoffs. But in 88, he's 40 and 28. They're not playing great baseball. They're not playing awful baseball, but things were just getting out of control. And he has this fight with Ed Whitson. He didn't get fired right away. He showed up in the dugout the next day. Ed Whitson, by the way, is a black belt in karate. Probably not the guy you want to be fighting in a bar. Billy got a broken arm and a black eye and who knows what else. He's in the dugout the next day with sunglasses and a sling. But it wasn't long after that, Billy was let go. That was the end for Billy in 88. It was the end of Billy's baseball managerial career. Tragically, as you know, on Christmas Day, 1989, Billy died in an awful accident. He was out with a friend of his, Bill Reedy, I want to say his name is. I think that was his name, Bill Reedy. They've been out having some fun, driving home. In front of Billy's house, they drive into a culvert, and Billy's tragically killed. So there's been controversy, and again, another thing I would like to have asked Billy Jr. this morning, and I apologize for all of you that tuned in to see Billy Jr. I will try to get him on, so I do appreciate you sticking it out with me here this morning. But Billy tragically dies. There's been controversy for years over who was driving, whether it was Billy or Bill Reedy, who claimed that he did. And again, at the end of the day, it doesn't matter. It's a tragic accident either way and unavoidable. So the interesting part of this, though, is it comes out in the aftermath of Billy's passing that George was gearing up for Billy 5 and was going to name him the manager of the Yankees for 1990. Who knows where things would have gone there? Billy was still only 61 years old. All in all, you look at Billy's list of accomplishments. Billy finished his career under 500 in a full season just one time, that last year in Oakland. He turned several franchises around. The Twins had been nowhere they hadn't been nowhere. They were competitive teams, I guess, but he still, to me, got the team into the playoffs where they hadn't. And the Tigers were an old, worn-out team and hadn't been close to the playoffs since 68. He got them to the playoffs in 72 and got them, within a game of getting to the World Series. That was a messed up season, too, by the way. There was a strike early in that season, and we played an uneven number of games. And that year, they just went with winning percentage. And the Tigers famously won the East with by a half a game over the Red Sox because they played one more game. Anyway, that's what strikes do. But I digress. The Rangers, maybe his best managing job ever. That team was awful. 57 games they won the year before he got there. Now they brought some reinforcements in. Fergie Jenkins, Hall of Fame pitcher, but they traded Bill Madlock for him. Jeff Burrows. But other than that, I can give you some of the names that you don't even know who they are. Mike Hargrove was a rookie. Dave Nelson played second base, isn't yet a great player. Lenny Randall's on that team. Joe LaHood. Oh, God. I can't even name any more guys. But Jim Bibby's on the starting staff. Jackie Moore. Guys that are just forgotten in the world of baseball. And Billy wins. What I say Billy won with that team? 84 games. Was in the race with the A's, the world champion A's in 1974. They were in the midst of winning their third World Series winning season in a row. Great team. He's got he's got them on the ropes all season, and then at the end of the season they fell back a bit. But that's probably his best managerial job. Then he comes to the Yankees, who, again, he's got Yankees in his blood. He wanted to be a Yankee manager from probably the time he was banished. He wanted to get back and be the Yankees manager. He was Casey's boy. And did some great things with the Yankees. You know, you take away all this stuff surrounding Billy on the outside. Some of the clubhouse turmoil. A lot of good teams have won with clubhouse turmoil, though. That didn't keep those teams from winning. They won. The Oakland A's that I just mentioned, 72, 73, 74, they had fights every other week. So again, it's not all about happy clubhouses are better clubhouses, but Billy comes in and changes things around because Billy plays ball differently. Billy ball. Move in again. Now we're going to get into where I start ranting about today's game. We don't play. We don't manufacture runs. Billy was a king at tactical managerial approach. He'd bunt. He'd hit and run. He'd steal. Always base runners in motion, which creates opportunities for guys to get balls through the holes where they wouldn't normally be because you've got defenders moving around. Billy ball is successful. We don't play that today. I mean, Billy might buy into some of the shifts and whatnot, but Billy was not in the analytics. Nobody was in analytics in the 70s and early 80s. Billy managed by his gut, and Billy did a great job. Billy manufactured runs, and I guarantee Billy added victories to each team's total for a given season. Again, look at the Rangers. They got no business winning 84 games in 1974. Some of those Yankees teams, great teams. 76 team, no Hall of Fame players on that team. Catfish Hunter. Thurman should be there. But again, no Hall of Fame players. We got Carlos May, Chris Chambliss, Sandy Alomar, Jim Bason's a shortstop. Nettles a great player. Roy White's a great player. I hope to have Roy White on the show here soon, by the way, for you Yankee fans. I'm expecting a call from him hopefully today. The Oakland A's, that team's got no business. I mean, they got some great players as things went along. They got Henderson, they got Murphy in the outfield. They had, those great pitchers that I mentioned, but they weren't rock solid teams. And every team Billy managed, at least when he got there and got things headed in the right direction, he was responsible for extra victories through the course of the year. Billy Martin belongs in the Hall of Fame. Let's see what Dave said here. Many people look at Billy in a bad way because of the way he was when he was out on the field. It didn't take away from what he managed. I agree, Dave. He's a great manager. He is one of the best of all times. I mean, unfortunately, he's got one World Series victory on his resume because he got fired in '78. But again, you just look at the turnaround jobs he did. Nobody's done that. Nobody. And you're right. That's why I wanted Billy Jr. on today to talk about, why Billy belongs in the World Series, or the World Series. Why Billy belongs in the Hall of Fame. We're going to be running out of time here soon, so I don't even know why I'm looking to see where Billy might be, but I'll look again anyway. Got nothing from him there. I got nothing from him there. So anyway, I don't know. We had some miscommunication, so we're not going to worry about it. We're winging it as best we can here. We got a few minutes left to kill. Billy, again, I'll wrap it up with Billy belongs in the Hall of Fame. And Billy Jr., by the way, is one of his biggest advocates. That's why I wanted to have Billy on. Billy, I learned some stuff about Billy that I didn't know. I knew he's a player manager or a player agent. And he's been one for 25 years. I think he's still doing that. But Billy managed himself. Billy Jr. managed the independent Texas Air Hogs in 2017. Had some success. Donnie Nelson, who the NBA fans would know as Don Nelson's son, was involved in the ownership in that team. And I think Billy Jr., from what I read, is still involved with that team in the front office. So I wanted to get all that information from Billy. He's got a great story to tell about the other side of Billy Martin. His dad spent a lot of time around those Yankee teams. I wanted to get those inside stories. And unfortunately, today's not the day that we got them. With this type of show, this stuff's going to happen. And I'm happy this is the first time that it's happened to me on my show. So let's talk a little bit about the future. I right now, I'm still lining up guests for November, but I do have Fred Mitchell on next week. As I mentioned, Fred was a longtime columnist for the Chicago Tribune, wrote about the Bears, the Cubs, and the Bulls. Only Tribune writer ever to cover all three teams. Wrote a great book about the great Gale Sayers. They were very close, and we'll talk a lot about that. So all you NFL fans and Gale Sayers fans, there was a lot of Gale Sayers fans. He would have been one of the best of all time, Gale Sayers, if he hadn't been injured as often as he was. It's really one of the sadder stories as far as careers cut short. Not tragically like Thurman Munson, but tragic in its own way, in the fact that this very talented guy who might have been the best runner that the league had ever seen if he'd been able to play a full career, his career was cut short. So we're going to talk a lot about that. The 13th is still up in the air. I had a really good guest as we started to head into the NCAA basketball season, but that one is a bit up in the air. But I do have, just so you Yankee fans know that have been in the room today, I wish I'd mentioned this at the top. I've got an interview in the can right now that I've been holding for a while. I could have played it today, I suppose, but I was hoping Billy would show up. I have an interview with Marty Appel, who was during the years that we were just talking about. A lot of those years, he was the PR man for the Yankees, and he's got some great stories about those Yankees in the 70s. Billy, Thurman, the Bobby Mercer trade, Reggie. And even when he wasn't involved and left them, he was still involved around the Yankees as he became the producer of the WPIX Channel 11 telecast of the Yankees. So Marty had some great stories. I interviewed him a couple of months ago now, and I got booked. I got everything booked solid. So probably in the next few weeks, I'm going to play that, and I'll promo it so you know what's coming up. And again, I apologize for all you Yankee fans that showed up today. I know there's a lot of people in the room earlier expecting to see Billy Jr., and, unfortunately, it didn't happen. So, I'm going to talk a lot about the future. I right now, I'm still lining up guests for November, but I do have Fred Mitchell on next week. As I mentioned, Fred was a longtime columnist for the Chicago Tribune, wrote about the Bears, the Cubs, and the Bulls. Only Tribune writer ever to cover all three teams. We will try to reschedule him, and we'll have a very similar conversation to this one at that time. And I guess we'll end the show today on that note. Good morning, Bob Engel. Before I go, there's my dad. Geez, I wish you'd come in sooner. I would have brought you in the room. I needed somebody to interview about Billy Martin because Billy Martin Jr. did not make it this morning. So he's flown solo, which I do on Sundays, by the way. I told you about Fred Mitchell next week. Don't forget my Sunday show. Guys, and again, there's a lot going on. So these shows have been about 2 hours. I've had a blast. We get people in the room asking a lot of questions. We'll cover the World Series. We'll cover some of the managerial changes in Major League Baseball this week. We'll cover that Saturday's college football, the stories in the NFL, which we've got some COVID situations going on again in both college and the pros. And we'll do our NFL picks. And I pick against some of you guys. So join me on Sundays, 9 a.m. Eastern time, too. We have a lot of fun on Sundays. So I hope you'll see us then. I'll see you next Friday as well with Fred Mitchell at 8 a.m. But I'll see you on the other side. I hope you have a great Friday. I hope the snow is not shovelable where you are. And I will see you next week. Actually, I'll see you Sunday and next week. And I'll be on Mac and Jack at 9:15. Look for Max Sports. I'll be talking about the Patriots game this weekend. See you then. Bye-bye.